Alright, so in this problem, or in this video, I will be going over the problem list palindrome number on LeetCode. It's number 9 on the LeetCode website. So to start off, let's go ahead and get into the problem statement. And this is how it goes. Given an integer x, return true if x is a palindrome and false otherwise. Uh, So to start off, let's actually talk about what's a palindrome. A palindrome is a word or a number that when you write it one way, let's say pop, if you write it backwards, it's exactly the same. So pop, because it's in the order, whether you write it backwards. Another one that would not be an example that's not a palindrome is actually example. So then I have, let's see, ELPMPMAXE example. Yeah, so I wrote it forward, I wrote it normal, I wrote it backwards. They don't match. So therefore, the word example is not a palindrome. So, and that's how that works out. Now, in this case, we're actually working with a number this time. And I have two examples here that I like to show. So starting with the first one, all right? So here's our input right here. When x is equal 121, we get true. And that's true because if I write 21 normally, and I'm writing this backwards, I promise, 121, they match. Now, what about here? So here's where things get interesting actually, and that is when x equals negative 121, that's false. The reason why is this. Check this out. So we'll write 121, and then if I write it backwards, 1, 2, 1, negative sign. It doesn't necessarily equal because of that negative sign. Like they have to be, it would have to basically be like this. Actually, write it right here. It would have to be 121 there. It wouldn't make sense to have it because it's not. You get me? Like it's just there. It's negative 121 minus. Minus what? It just doesn't work. So that's why in this example it would just be that a negative number will have to be false. Or ones that just don't match. Another example that will be false will be 1, 2, 3. I put that backwards. 3, 2, 1. It doesn't match. So that's how that would be. So now that we have that out the way, let's actually get a quick understanding of what it is. So let's break this down on this little problem, and that is our input would be, and that would be an integer, so an int. And what we're going to be outputting is a boolean. So output is going to be bool. So bool is just true or false is what we call it. And that's basically how this whole thing from start to finish. Start, we're getting a number and we're outputting whether it's true or false or a boolean. Now, the next thing we're going to go look at is matching. So we're looking at the numbers here and we're trying to compare them. So for matching, what's a toolbox? I have a toolbox of stuff that I'm going to look at. And what is this toolbox? And that toolbox is things like if statements. So I'm definitely going to use if statements for this toolbox. Statements. Another thing I'm going to be using is going to be let's see, because it is going to be actually, now that I said it back in my head, we're going to be using this method where we basically take a word or a list and it actually reverses it. So this method reverses like any string. And however, we're using palindrome. I'm sorry, the palindrome we're using is going to be a number. So this means that we have we have to concatenate. So concatenate string. And the way how that works is I'll show it, but I'll actually just give an example. It would be something like this, like, I don't know, let's say x, for example, that's an integer, but I need to turn that to a string. Well, do something like this, string x. I now concatenated an integer into a string. That's how that would work out. And looking at like what toolboxes that I can use, I know I'm going to concat. So let me actually separate these out. So I know I'm going to use those statements. I know I'm going to be concatenating. I'm sorry, concatenating. That's true. Concatenating is true. But I'm also going to be reversing the string. That's like the main thing that we're doing here. We're reversing what we got so we can get an answer. And so let's actually get into the planning portion now that we have our matching out the way. Let's go ahead and let's actually see what we got. So I'm going to start with taking an input. So we're going to take an input of a number. We'll call it num. We're going to integer. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to concatenate it. We have to turn our input into a string. So I would probably take string number and that's going to equal our. Let's go ahead and just pseudocode this part. I'm going to do a mix of pseudocode and actual typing. So when we do get into the coding part, it's more just like copy and paste to some degree. So it's going to take an input of a number, and then my string number is going to be num concatenated into a string. So my integer turns into a string, and then next I'm going to have a reverse string. Reverse string. I'm sorry, reverse number is probably what I'll call it. And that is going to equal string number. And that's where we're going to use this method. Now this method right here, how I'm doing it, is exactly how we're going to be putting it in the code. Because I'm going to take the string number, it's going to reverse it, and we're going to have our reverse number be declared. And now that is set up. Next thing we're going to go ahead and do is now we're actually going to see if they equal each other. And this is where the if statements come in. So now this is important. Now I made this mistake when I was coding it, but it's very important to pay attention to what we got. And that is our string number is equal to reverse number. Then we're simply going to return true. If they equal each other, true. Alright. Else, and we don't have to specify like if they don't equal each other, we could just jump into else. And so else, we're going to return false. And that's kind of how our planning is going to be. So to recap that planning portion, we're going to take an input of a number. We're going to turn that number into a string. We're going to declare a variable by making it a string. We're going to go ahead and declare a third variable. And that variable is going to be the reverse of a string number. Then what we're going to do is we're going to compare our string number and our reverse string number and see if they equal each other or they match. If they do match, we are going to return true. Else, if they don't, then it's just going to go ahead straight into returning false, and that's the end of it. This is basically our plan. So now that we have our plan, let's actually get to the coding of it. So this is how the code's going to look. So we're going to take our input, imp is going to equal input. And then what's going to happen is we're going to take our str string underscore num, and that's going to equal to str. We're going to concatenate our input. And that's how we concatenate. We take our string, now we have string num. Now we're actually going to go ahead and make a third variable, and that's going to be our reverse string. So rev, and then string. Oh, actually num, I'm sorry. Rev num, my reverse number. And that is going to equal string underscore num. And this is where we have that one method where we're going to have semicolons or colon colon -1. And now that we have these, now we compare. So first things first is if string num is equal to rev underscore num. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and tab in. Tab with 3 spaces. I'm actually going to print it. So print true. Because they equal each other. Now, take else, 2, 3. We're going to go ahead and print false. And looking at it, taking a good look at my code, let's review that real quick. Oh, let's review it. So we have our input. Input looks good. We're concatenating our input, turning that into a string. That looks good. The next step we're going to do is set our reverse string. That looks good. And now we're comparing strings, the normal string number and the rev. This is the part where I messed up and I accidentally put my input and we're comparing it. The issue is that then it would just be you're comparing a number and a string, and then it would outright not work because they're two different types of variables, regardless if they match. So then it would print out true if they do equal each other. Else they print out false, and that's it. That's how this palindrome number would work out. I think what makes it work is concatenating it. Is when we concatenate and reverse it, and that's what makes this all work out. All right, that's it in this video. Thank you for watching.